Today, Alex, Martin, and I will be discussing the bizarre and somewhat twisted case of Walter Collins Jr. and his mother,
Hmm.
Christine Collins.
Yes.
And it's a sad story that goes back to the 1920s. Is that right, Martin?
Yes, 1928, in fact, when little Walter Jr. was just 9 years old. And so, just a little bit of background. So, his mum, called Christine Collins, as you said, she married a man who was a convict called Walter Sr., and they had a son in 1918 called Walter Jr., and they settled in Lincoln Heights in LA as their kind of their family home. And so on March 10th, 1928, Walter, being just 9 years old, his mum, Christine, gave him some money to go to the local cinema to watch a movie. Not sure what movie it was because he never came back. And
Mm.
so as the hours passed between like dusk and it turned into darkness, Christine contacted the LAPD to report that Walter was missing. And so immediately their mind went to Walter's father. Not that he'd taken Walter because he was actually in prison, in Folsom State Prison, but because he worked in the prison cafeteria. And apparently, one of his responsibilities was reporting people for like bad behavior in the prison itself. And so they thought that perhaps he'd made some enemies whilst in prison, and that this had been an abduction as a bit of revenge from the people that he had kind of dobbed in, as it were, in the prison for doing bad things. So basically, that was their first thought. And so the LAPD at this time were not really in the best shape. They were in the bad but general public. There was corruption scandals that were going on, and there was some other missing missing people cases that they just weren't solving. So they were a little bit useless. And so at this time, they were pretty desperate to make sure that Walter was found, preferably alive and preferably really quickly, so they could get a notch under their belt on this one. And so yeah, earlier in 1928, someone called Marion Parker was abducted and killed by a horrific known killer, a guy called William Hickman, who was only 19 at the time in LA. So there were other like child abduction cases that had ended pretty badly. So they were really, really keen to get this sorted as soon as possible. So they got some tips in at the time of people that supposedly saw Walter around the area. There was a gas station, and the attendant in the gas station, a guy called Richard Slobbers, claimed to have seen him in the back of a car wrapped in newspapers, which struck me as a little bit odd. There isn't too much more information about like how he was wrapped or anything, but just like wrapped up in newspapers. And some of the reports that I saw suggested that he was potentially dead, whilst others thought that he was alive. There's a little bit of miscommunication about whether he was alive or dead there. But apparently that's what these people saw. And so another man at the gas station as well, a guy called Stevie Stanley, followed this foreign-looking couple, but they apparently sped off when they thought that they were being followed. I mean, interesting that they specifically said like foreign. It's a little bit like, I don't know,
Yeah.
foreign person took him.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Therefore dodgy.
so
Yeah.
so Walter wasn't seen. Well, he actually, spoilers, but he wasn't seen ever again. And over the next 5 months, there were no arrests made. There was no sign of him, and so it looked like it was going to stay unsolved. And but at this time, within this 5 month period earlier on, in May time, two brothers called Nelson and Lewis Winslow had also gone missing and supposedly had been abducted in LA as well. And so there was like a growing mounting pressure on LAPD to solve this particular case. And so they were doing everything. Well, they were hoping that basically Walter would either show up or they would get some kind of breakthrough, because nothing was happening. Nothing was going for them at the time. And so in August of 1928, they remarkably got a call from the police department in a place called DeKalb in Illinois. I don't know if anyone in the chat or anyone at home is from there, but
shout out to DeKalb, Illinois.
Yeah, exactly. And the DeKalb police said that Walter had been discovered alive. And so they sent a whole load of pictures over to the LAPD department. But there was one problem with this. And this was that when they showed the pictures to Christine, she was certain that this boy just was not her son. Like, if you look at the pictures, there's like a resemblance, but it's clearly not her son. Like, you know who your son is. It's been 5 months. It's not like it's been like 30 years, right? And so the police were so desperate to get a breakthrough in the case that they basically dismissed what she said and asked her to pay. I mean, she was desperate, of course. It's not him, but let's meet this person, maybe have some information at least.
Yeah.
So she paid, I think it was $70 for him to come from Illinois over to LA.
And that's a lot of money back then.
Yeah,
$70.
yeah,
That's in today's money, that would be, I don't know, but
a
like
lot.
15 times more than that, probably.
something like that,
10,
yeah.
15 times more.
Yeah, it'd be a massive amount of money. So anyway, so Walter, inverted commas, came to LA. But then, of course, when they met up, Christine was like, yeah, it's not my son. And this is the craziest bit of the story here. I laugh if it wasn't so tragic, but the police, and in particular this Captain Jones, who was like the chief in charge of this case, they basically were desperate to have this reunification of the mother and son as being like really good PR after the previous murders and people going missing. So he told Christine to try out the boy for a while, to take him home and basically see what happened, like see if you remember that he's your son or see if it works out, which is just absolutely insane. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah. I think the quote is try him out for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Like a car. Take him for a test drive.
That's
Absolutely mental.
As I say, hilarious if it wasn't so horrific.
Just to interrupt you, Martin, Doom in the chat says, "Oh, like that Angelina Jolie film." Yeah, this is the case of that. The Changeling, isn't it? The 2008 film.
Yeah,
that's correct.
A film I haven't actually seen, so I do want to watch it. I will watch it after this. So yeah, so she did as well, which is, I think, is also kind of odd. Huh? You know, that's a bit strange as well, isn't it? Anyway, she took the boy home, or maybe it was for shelter or whatever. And of course, she came back a couple of weeks later and was like, "Yeah, still not my son.
Not my son.
I have, still, after a couple of weeks, I can see it's not my son." And so Captain Jones, in a remarkable and bizarre case, accused her of being a bad mother and for looking to embarrass the police force.
It's mad, isn't it? Yeah, his I think his words were something like, "What are you trying to do? You're trying to make us look foolish." And she's like, "I just want to find my son.
My son back, please."
This is not my son. Yeah.
I want to find my son. You're the most cruel, heartless woman I've ever met, I think is what he said, or something like that.
Absolutely bizarre. So the upshot of this was that Christine was put in a psychiatric ward for 10 days under a code 12, which is the code they use to jail someone who's considered basically an inconvenience to the police.
Wow.
So she was there for 12 days. She was there for 12 days, and then was released. So she was put in prison for debating taking some random kid home. So the LAPD were like, okay, well, this is a little bit odd. We've been embarrassed and we've had our ego hit, but it is a bit odd that there's this kid who clearly isn't this woman's son. We've seen pictures, etc.
Yeah.
And so they basically took the kid to the police station and grilled him for hours and hours. And in the end, he admitted that he was lying, and in fact was a 12-year-old boy, so 3 years older, called Arthur Hitchens, and he was actually from Iowa. And so the boy had been pretending to be Walter because he wanted to escape to get to Hollywood. There was a Hollywood star that he was really, really invested in. He wanted to get there. And he'd been suffering abuse at the hands of his stepmother, supposedly after his mother died. And so he used this as an excuse. He saw it in the local news, basically, from where he was, that this boy had been abducted. And it was like, look, kind of similar. It will get me to LA where I want to be. Of course, she'll realize that I'm not her son, but it won't matter. I'll be in Hollywood, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, the actor Tom Mix, I think, was the boy's favorite actor. I think he was like a Western actor. He would just, I kind of can't fault him for trying that. I think didn't someone say to him in a diner or wherever he was, he resembles this missing kid.
Yeah, someone put the idea in his head by saying you look a bit like that kid, because everyone was
you look like that kid in Hollywood who's gone missing.
Yeah.
Hollywood, you say?
If anybody's interested, especially those watching us on screen right now, you should be able to see a side-by-side comparison. On the right-hand side is the original Walter Collins, an image of him in the newspaper. On the left-hand side is a picture of, was it Arthur Hutchins? Is that his name?
Yeah.
The changeling child. And I don't know if the resemblance is that strong. They both have ears and a nose, which is kind of similar.
The kid on the left, old Arthur, he looks a little bit like he's like a son of a Italian mafia boss, doesn't he? He's like, hey, what do you know? Whereas the one on the right looks like a kind of shy.
Well, she said that, didn't she? She said that her son was a really polite young man, really easy to look after, whereas this new new boy is difficult, and he always calls me Ma. Like she actually said that. Hey, Ma.
Yeah, and he's also not my son. Like, oh man, but she's in like a horrendous state, right?
Yeah,
kid's been abducted, hasn't come home for 5 months,
and she's been imprisoned in a psychiatric ward.
Yeah, and people see people want to do whatever they can. People see mediums and psychics or whatever, even if they previously don't believe in it at all. So I don't know whether there's like a tiniest bit of hope that that in some way there's some kind of connection there, So you don't know what's going on with poor Christine. But yeah. But Arthur Hutchins, apparently went on to lead a pretty successful life, and he died later in 1954. So he just led a pretty normal.
I mean, you say that though. 1954, he couldn't have been that old then.
Well, no, he died quite young actually, didn't he? But he led like basically a normal life for the rest of it. But yeah, no, you're right. He wouldn't have been that old, would he? Yeah.
It's sad, isn't it? Because you've got one child that's gone missing, but then you've got this other child who's from an abusive family, who's run away from home, who just wants to get a good life for himself, and has seized an opportunity in perhaps a very American way to better himself, obviously at the expense of other people. But at the same time, he's only been able to do this. He's been facilitated, as you say, Martin, by the police being incredibly negligent. And kind of what's not just negligent, what's like the step beyond that? Where they
corrupt.
Like that's a good word, maybe. Yeah.
So they're actually callous. Yeah. I mean, they're actually. This is just so they can close a case, even though the case isn't solved. It's not closed. You can't just say you can't. They were trying to. People in the comments are saying this is textbook gaslighting. They're trying to gaslight this woman into thinking that this is her son.
Actually insane. Yeah, pretty mad. So, what happened to the real Walter Collins? So just to kind of step back a little bit, in September 1928, a Canadian woman called Winifred Clark contacted the US authorities to say that her nephew, Sanford Clark, had been kidnapped and taken to California. And so this is Jessie Clark was worried about her, that was her nickname. Jessie Clark was worried about her 15-year-old brother since he left a couple of years prior to this to go and work on his uncle Gordon Stewart Northcutt's farm, his chicken farm, and his uncle was only 21 at the time. So Jessie decided to go and investigate and be like, okay, I'm worried about my my brother who's on this farm in California. So she headed down to California, found her uncle, and found that he was actually abusing her brother at this farm. And so basically Sanford was taken away. So Sanford Clark, the younger brother, was taken away from this place, and eventually he came clean to investigators who said that his uncle had kidnapped him and had physically and sexually abused him on this chicken farm in California, and forced him to watch the abuse and the murders of young boys, including Walter Collins, and then the two brothers I mentioned earlier, Nelson and Lewis Winslow, and also some other boys apparently too. And he's told these investigators that on occasions he made him also participate in these particular murders, and led them to this incubator room to see the hatching of the chicks, and then would kill them with an axe from behind, and then would cover their bodies in quicklime to supposedly try and destroy the evidence. And so Sanford...
So, sorry to interrupt. Quicklime, is that what is that? Is that like he's trying to dissolve them? Is that...
I think that's the case, yeah. I think
some kind of chemical. He's trying to get rid of them Walter White style.
Does Walter end up using that? I'm not sure. Yeah,
I don't know if it's quicklime, but he dissolves people in acid, I think.
It's that kind of thing, isn't it? It's like
quicklime kills all the smell and the germs and everything. It just burns it. I think you're right. Dissolves.
It's a white caustic alkaline crystalline solid at room temperature. Okay, so there we go.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, so it would be used to get rid of the bodies. Pretty horrendous stuff. So Sanford, the younger brother, told the police that he could find graves near the chicken coop of the grave of Walter Collins and of the other bodies. And so when the police went down there, they investigated this particular place, and they did find graves, but they didn't find like the whole bodies. They just found like bits and pieces of bones and stuff.
Yes.
And also they found weapons within the house, in this particular house, and farm equipment that had hair and blood coated on it. So of course, Gordon Northcott was arrested. He actually had gone back to Canada, where he was from originally, visiting, and he was arrested there along with his mother, Sarah Louise Northcott. So he confessed to the murder of Walter Collins. Northcott's mother confessed to the murder of Walter Collins. She's saying that she actually ended up killing him because he like knew too much about what was going on at the particular farm.
Right.
And so so she, I don't know whether she was actually trying to cover for her son, but in the end, he ended up admitting to the murders of Nelson and Lewis Winslow, the two brothers that were abducted in LA, and a Mexican boy called Alva Garcia. It's not known whether there were more. Like, investigators initially thought there might have been over 20 bodies, but in the end, he was charged for those three, but not Walter Collins. It was his mother that was charged with Walter Collins's murder. But the body of Walter Collins was never found.
Yeah. It's quite strange, isn't it? Like, it's a mother and son doing these crimes together.
It's really weird. If you look into it properly, there's a lot of detail on the fact that he admitted, Gordon did, that him and his mother were in like an incestuous relationship, and that his dad had like raped his sister and stuff. It's like really horrific stuff. Like, it's pretty. So basically, there's a lot going on there that was horrendous, and of course the murders as well. The fact that he was involved with it, that his mother was involved with it, and then also that they dragged in his nephew.
Yeah.
As well. It's just the whole thing's just complete poor Sanford. And so in February 1929, Northcott was convicted of the murders of those three boys. And whilst awaiting trial, Christine met up with Northcott in prison, but said that his answers were like really conflicting. He was like saying, I think I remember him, but actually I don't. I'm not sure if I've ever met him. And so she then believed, as a result of this, that her son could still be alive. And my personal opinion here is that he was probably playing games with her and going back and forth of like, I'm not sure if I knew him. I'm not sure if I saw him. You know how you get this with some serial killers when they try and play games with the family. And so, in the end, he said, I'll tell you all about it, all about what happened. This was a few days before his eventual execution, actually. I'll tell you all about it if you come and visit me, and promised to tell the truth. Of course, when she arrived, she said, I don't want to see you. I don't want to see you. I'm innocent. I don't want to see you. Yeah. So just playing games.
I mean, he said that he had never seen Walter.
Yeah.
And the weird thing that I find with this, I mean, maybe it was because there was a big story about Walter at the time, like as one of the missing children, and the big kind of PR disaster that had happened with the LAPD. But what I don't understand is he readily confessed to the other murders. And this is like, deathbed confessions. There's no reason for him to lie at this point. He's going to be executed. So do you think it was just sheer malice that he didn't confess to this mother, Christine? Or do you think that he was literally insane and didn't actually remember? Because I think that was her conclusion, having spoken to him.
Yeah.
That it wasn't like he was being manipulative or playing games or anything, but just that she decided like he didn't even know. He killed some kids, but he didn't even know if this was.
Yeah, I mean, that could be rationalizing in her head of like, he's probably still alive then. He must be mad. If he doesn't know, then Walter might still be alive, And that's the other side of the coin, isn't it? It's like, she'll do whatever she can. She'll play mind gymnastics to think that he's still alive. But all she did. She didn't stop looking for him until her death in 1964.
Yeah, 36 years looking for him.
Yeah, exactly. Which is utterly tragic.
Yeah.
So as a result of this, Christine, of course, never gave up looking. And the town, Wineville, which is where the farm was, changed its name to Miraloma, which means view from the hill in Spanish, which is much nicer association.
It's nicer.
But of course, if you're like, crap, crap, Miraloma, that's where I live. I'm sure you would know about this if you lived there.
Shout out to Miraloma in the chat.
Exactly,
Anybody from there? Did you know about the chicken coop murders? Let us know. Have you been to the chicken coop? Where is it now? How's it looking? Let us know.
I imagine they must have torn it down, surely.
Yeah.
The house is still standing, apparently.
Really?
Oh my God, that's got to be haunted.
But not the coop, but the house itself. House. Yeah, if you go on Google and I think it's house 33.
Is it a museum?
3360. I know it's not a museum.
Wow. Actually, still a house.
336. It doesn't matter. Why am I saying this? Anyway, you can basically look up the house.
Yeah,
you can see it. Yeah, in Wine. It's on Wineville Road or something. So there's still roads called Wineville, but the town's changed its name. Yeah.
Well, Christine Collins did sue the police, the LAPD, in 1930s. I don't know if that was before or after Northcott was executed, but around the same time. And she won. She won the case. She won back then, I think, $10,800 in damages, which must be about $170,000 today.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is around that.
Which is pretty good, except final sting, the police never paid.
Nope.
How ridiculous. This is, of all the horrific things that happened in this case, I'm not saying this is like worse, but this just like makes me so angry that the police didn't, they were tried, they were convicted to pay the sum, and they just chose not to. They just didn't. And the police captain, J. Jones, the comic book villain, was then reinstated as the chief of police.
Yeah.
Literally, they had no kind of repercussions as a result of any of this.
Because of his valuable years of experience, Alex. And
in
his
gaslighting women and sending them to mental institutions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's horrific all round, isn't it? It's really terrible. Bad. But the whole thing of, a random kid showing up. And I can't believe that he stayed with her for 2 weeks. That's one of the things about the story that gets me is like he just stayed in her house.
I mean,
what do you talk about?
Surely, like the first thing you would ask is, "When's your birthday?" When's your birthday?
Good point. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, you have to certainly clue off in your background, wouldn't you?
But yes, it would be interesting to know because there's things the police made contact with him first, so it's possible that
they fed him information.
Yeah, the boy convinced the police, and that was what was important. That's why she got stuck with the child. So if they asked leading questions, or if he had gleaned enough information from the wanted posters and the radio broadcasts, information about him, then he could have, convinced in inverted commas, like Martin said, the police wanted him to be found. So they were probably willing to close their ears to anything that was not quite ringing true.
Yeah.
Because he was also 3 years older than Walter.
Yes.
He's 12 years old.
And that's a big, like that age as well.
It's quite a big gap.
The difference between a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old is massive.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if we mentioned it. But speaking of that, in those 3 weeks when he lived with her, she went to the dentist and got his dental records because she had dental records of her son, Walter, and this new kid's dental records didn't match Walter's dental records. So she went back to the police with dental records. It wasn't just like, this hysteric lady, doesn't recognize her own son.
Yeah.
She had actual empirical proof that this kid was not her son.
It's so
disgusting.
Bizarre. So bizarre.
Also in the chat, Spiffing commented saying, apparently the David Clay confession never happened in real life. So I am misleading everyone. I'm very sorry. I am fake news. So sorry, ignore what I said. Thank you, Spiffing, for looking that up.
Yeah. There we go. Well, it's a sad and sobering story, and I just can't imagine the pain that Christine Collins went through.